So here we are. It is 2025. Oh, it's a quarter of a century into this millennium. I think it's going to be a milestone year. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is Ren's monthly momentum. So we do this the third Wednesday of every month. And we usually have some great guest speakers talking about something topical. So of course it's January. So what do we usually talk about from the Canadian perspective? Well, we've been talking about the weather bombs for the last 10 minutes, but we often talk about RSP season and how to potentially look at opportunities that give you more than 3% RSP, and the exempt market and private equity and all of those fun things. So I think we're going to have quite a rich and deep conversation tonight, because we've got not only one great guest speaker in our good friend Lynn Trevisan. I know a lot of the Ren members recognize Lynn. We always talk about how she stalked me on Meetup years ago, and we've been friends now for, is that 4 years?
It's probably 5 anyway.
Wow. So
yeah,
super cool. So that was ages and ages ago, and we're here, and she's brought her 2 teammates along. So Ilan Handelsman and I have known each other now for 3 or 4 years. We met in Victoria, and I can't remember, Lynn, did you introduce me to Ilan? I think so, right? And then we kind of realized that there was some small world stuff, and Ilan knows so many of the same people that I know. What were you going to say, Ilan?
Time flies by. It is longer than that.
Really?
It is longer than that. Well,
wow.
Yes, because it would have been about 2019. Yeah, 2018 or 2019 is when you and I would have first met in Victoria.
That makes sense. And I believe that Raintree Financial Solutions actually had a booth at my first Victoria Real Estate Expo back in 2017. So
that predates me.
Crazy, right? Yeah, that was one of those small world things that we talk about. And then rounding out for the evening, new to me, and we met just before I came to Mexico, and we were like, okay, we got to spend more time together and get to know each other more, and that's Robin Marshall. So welcome to Robin, Ilan, and Lynn. So we're just going to probably get into it pretty quickly, but I just want to remind everybody, please pop into the chat where you're joining us from. It's always nice to see where people are joining us from. Obviously, I'll keep letting people in as they pop in. And if you have some questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I want to get right into it tonight, because I think we're going to be talking about quite a bit. And we'll go with the Ren updates after we've had our presentation from Lynn and Raintree. And Turnstone Wealth is the new term that I'm seeing. So I know you're going to update us on that. And remind me when we're done to tell you, I said I had a small world story about this picture that I've got behind me. So this is one of the houses that we've been looking at in Mexico, and I just have a fun kind of small world story to tell about that. So I'll tell that afterwards.
Fantastic. So, and this is, I think, really our first real public launch of Turnstone Wealth. Let's see, it was 2024 was definitely a year, and I think Turnstone was born in July, Turnstone Wealth. And really what Turnstone is about is, I know many of the Ren members, so an exempt market dealing representative. I work with Raintree Financial Solutions. Ilan, I've worked with Ilan at Raintree for years. And we have another partner, her name's Jen, also has worked with Ilan, and actually they've worked even more closely for years. And we decided that things would be more fun together, and we wanted to expand really our scope of practice a little. I very much am focused on the exempt space, and Ilan and Jen have done a lot more on the portfolio manager side of the business, so public market assets. And we saw a gap in working with our clients that we also wanted to provide financial planning services, insurance services, and hence Robin started to work with us in 2024, and it will continue going forward as a team together 2025. So one of the first things we did, what is the mission of Turnstone Wealth, as we were really trying to define who and what we wanted to be, and really reflecting on how we've each built our own practices. And really, we are just such a fantastic fit, because while we have the same respect and client management, client service, we do each bring different strengths to the table. So one of the things that we believe in is asking those tough questions and really challenging status quo. We certainly want to understand each client. Many of us, we're very client-centric. And then with the help of Robin, we're able to do more than what we could have done previously from a financial planning perspective. So being able to do those, thought through wealth and investment plans. So you'll get to see some of that as we go through the presentation. So that's who we are in our spiffy headshots. And capturing here kind of where each of us live. So we've already been through this, but Ilana's in Victoria, Robin also on the island. Jen is our fourth partner that is not here tonight. She's actually on the mainland, but still West Coast. And they let me, this Ontario person, round out the foursome here, which honestly has been working really well because of even just time zones. We had a major crunch period in November, and I was, Jen and I were handing off back and forth, and the time zones actually really supported us. So Ilan, Jen, and I all worked and still work with Raintree, so we can still provide exempt. All of us provide those exempt market products through Raintree. And then Robin, I'll let her introduce herself in the next slide. But Robin brings in some of those pieces we didn't have around the CFP and some really depth of an insurance perspective. So,
great, thanks, Lynn.
Yeah. I think next was to you anyway, Robin. Right?
It is. Ooh, so my fingers too fast. So as they mentioned, I was happy to join the team last August, and there's all these connections we talk about, and one of the advisors that was on my team is actually a close friend of Ilan's. And I had retired from finance the year previously, back in 2023. So I had a 30-year career in finance where I both managed a portfolio of clients myself, and then was managing a team of investment and insurance advisors. And funnily, like I said, funny enough, Ted's like, I've got this friend of mine who's got a private practice and they're looking for a planner. You guys should meet. And it was just one of those instant connections. And as they say, the rest is history. So I'm really excited to be part of the team, and then bringing this foundational piece that we start with all of our clients, which is starting with a financial plan. The planning piece is so important because it really lays out what's important to you. We're not just looking to sell a product, whether that's an investment or insurance, but it really is focused on our clients and giving them the best possible financial advice that we can provide them. So the foundational pieces, like I said, from that is the financial plan. And then we build up from there, as the pyramid says, making sure that you have a will and a power of attorney, and then addressing those things that might be out of your control. Life happens. And so we want to give people the tools in their toolkit to plan for the unexpected. We then look at the things you can control: spending, budgets, taxation, the types of savings, and then help with the growth opportunities in the future. And that's where we look at layering in different types of investments, whether that's insurance protected investments, our exempt portfolios, or our pooled portfolios, which are all aspects that we look in to see what makes the most sense for you. As Liza mentioned, everyone's always wondering, I get this question first: what should I do? Should I invest my RSPs? Should we pay down your mortgage? And I always tell people there's no one answer. It really is depending upon your situation. And that's where these intricacies of diving in and finding what's most important for you and what's going on in your life is really critical. I was just sharing with some clients this morning. when I was in practice, we had an A&W that was a block from our branch. And there was a core group of my clients that used to meet there every Thursday mornings. And no word of a lie, Thursday afternoons, I'd start to get calls. What do you think about this investment? What do you think about crypto? My buddy is saying that he's bought this specific thing. And so now I jokingly call them those A&W conversations. And what's great for Jen or Alexis or Richard might not be the right thing for Inga. So it's always interesting to hear what's going on out there, but when it comes down to it, is looking at your own situation and what makes the most sense for you, and then for us to be able to deliver you that advice. All right, so then that kind of dovetails into our investment approach. Did we lose Lynn?
Hey, Robin.
Yes.
I really want to give a tangible example of how a financial plan has helped some of our clients. So one of the things that we all know and understand is that when we retire, if we've worked and contributed in Canada to CPP, we get our CPP benefit. And then there's also the old age security benefit. The thing about old age security is it gets clawed back if you earn too much. And part of your earnings are your RSP withdrawals. So when Robin does this financial planning process, one of the things that she can discover is, hey, when should you start pulling your RSP money out to be as tax efficient as possible and to maximize the amount of OAS that you get to keep. And so for a number of our clients, she's recommended that they, as they're approaching retirement, start withdrawing. So we had a client a couple of weeks ago who's gone to half time. So Robin's like, why don't you start pulling some of that RSP money out now? And when she models it, it actually ends up putting more money in our client's pocket through their retirement years because they don't have an OAS clawback. And so that's one tangible example of many that the planning process can result in.
Yeah, that's a great example. So those are the different times we look at is what makes the most sense. Is it an RSP or a tax-free savings account? When do we start those withdrawals? What are your different sources of income, both now and in retirement? And I think we had lost Lynn, but she's back.
I am back. Whoops, and I can turn my video back on. So
there you are. We see you.
Goodness, we made you host. And anyway, that was my husband, not my internet, who's doing some electrical projects. So forgive me.
Well, it's perfect timing because I just finished my little piece and it's, back over to you to chat around our investment approach.
Excellent. And so I'm just a little bit thrown, but anyway, okay. Moving on.
Problem.
So investment approach, right? So it's once we come out of that kind of planning stage, and forgive me if I am redundant here, we sort of we have that idea around asset allocations, around appropriate accounts to place different investments. We have thinking around tax strategies. And then really that's where we can come in and assist with both those exempt market investments provided by Raintree, as well as on the private side. And many, as we found, REN members and real estate investors, kind of gravitate to some of these private market investments because they just make sense to them. And they're often a good fit and complement to kind of hard asset real estate, be it either real estate investments themselves of portfolios in different types of real estate, or non-real estate to help diversify away from real estate. So we've got kind of these private investments, and then we can also refer into portfolio managers for public market assets. So as much as I love private market investments, they are illiquid vehicles. They're certainly high risk, long-term investments. And Robin, you mentioned, life happens. You do need to have some portion of your portfolio that is liquid, that you can, rely on if if needed. So we certainly have the idea is kind of building it out as what makes the most sense, where are people in their stages, and move that forward. Previously, Liza, we've gone through and kind of done an overview of investments that some of the REN members are in. I decided not to do that this time. This is a kind of a snapshot of the many different investments that we have on the Raintree shelf. And ultimately, we mentioned we want to map in time horizons, income goals versus growth goals, tax considerations versus not. So really one of the most fun things I have is putting together what does this mix of portfolio look like for a client. And some of the REN members would recognize some of these names because they're in there. MakeSpace and ICM and Avenue Living and the dental funds, the New Look funds, dental and industrial. And it's been a good year. It's been a good number of years for many of the funds the REN members are in. It's just the kind of in targeted investment goals, and they just continue to deliver as target, if not greater. And it's been fun to service a number of these because you like calling people with good news. So so we just wanted to give that snapshot. Yeah,
and
go
Lynn,
ahead.
I'm just going to jump in for a sec because I can see, quite a few of, we had Jeff LaFleur from ICM come on and talk about their products. We know we've got lots of people invested in Centurion. MakeSpace has definitely been a good one. And if I remember correctly, MakeSpace has a really low investment amount. Didn't it start at something like 5,000 or 6,500?
Yes. So there's a couple of them that are low.
Yeah, I think it's a great reminder to think about the fact that you can actually get into the exempt market with amounts as little as $6,500, because a lot of people think it's so out of reach, and it's actually not out of reach. And I also just want to sort of come back to the point of a lot of people have been a little bit nervous about the exempt market, but with everybody being so nervous about the real, the tangible real estate market, that they have to be like picking up hammers and shovels and looking after tenants on. This is far less work. And we've seen, as you've mentioned, some pretty darn good returns compared to what those of us who have been actually managing real properties has been like. So definitely good to add to the portfolio if you haven't done that already. So I just want to put my 2 cents in there because I know all the REN members who have invested with you are pretty darn happy.
And I mean, one of the biggest differences there is that these are portfolios. All right. I think Avenue sent out a summary it might even just been yesterday. They're over $6 billion in their fund, right? That is a ton of diversification just within one fund. So as individual investors and property owners, we hold 1, 2, 3 properties. If any one property doesn't perform as expected, that can be a major drag on somebody's portfolio. So, if one property in the Avenue Living portfolio doesn't perform, oh well, right? Right. It's just, you are really getting diversification across within these different portfolios. So what we thought, instead of kind of doing deep dive and presenting charts and graphs on each of these individual investments, we thought we would actually talk about individual case studies. Trying to just, it might be that people see themselves in some of these cases, and it's just more interesting when you put them into people. So, and I think, Ilan, is it you that's...
I'm doing the first one.
Robin's doing the first one. Okay. And we're going to trade through these guys as well. So
yeah.
Robin, you again.
So we've put some of these really interesting cases together that kind of touch in some different aspects. And from my perspective, I'm taking like the 30,000 foot view. What's important to you? What are your goals? What do you want? What do you need your money to do for you? And then there can be some really fascinating complexities that come up through individual client situations. And so this is one. This couple, she's a well-established engineer, well-respected in her field, making a high income. Her partner has decided to go back to school to pursue his master's degree. So right now she's the single income earner, and she has a daughter from a previous relationship. So I'm always looking at that from a future planning perspective. How do we make sure that the family's taken care of? What do we do to make sure that if something happens or she's unable to work, that the family continues to function? And what was really interesting and why I brought this particular case up is she's also a dual citizenship. She was born in the U.S. and she's certified in both the U.S. and Canada, so she's not ready to give up her U.S. citizenship. So what that means is that actually, from a planning perspective, it can be quite complicated because now we have the IRS involved, and where we need to look at being sensitive to planning for U.S. persons, and you probably come across this a lot. I know, like in the Lower Mainland, we have a lot of people that have dual citizenship. If your portfolio, for example, when you were to pass away, is more than $5 million, it's subject to worldwide taxation, meaning that the IRS would also tax your estate. U.S. estate tax, when it's over $1 million, is 40%. So this is something that we need to plan for in the future. How do we grow their portfolio in a way that doesn't have them impacted by taxes in the future by the IRS? She also needs to have insurance. She's the major wage earner in their family. But in an interesting twist, insurance is not tax-free proceeds according to the IRS. So if you're a Canadian, you have dual citizenship, you have this taxation, then you can be subject to taxation on those insurance proceeds in the US as well, whereas we don't have that here in Canada. So it's a tricky thing to take into consideration as well, and something that we're helping them to work through because it wasn't on their radar previously. So this has been a really interesting case. We've connected them with a cross-border tax accountant to make sure that we've got everything lined up and in working on both sides of the border. So this has been a really interesting case that we've been working through with them for sure. And then the next one, I'm going to hand over to Ilan.
Hi, everyone. I am going to introduce you to Vivian. Vivian is an engineer, and Vivian has been a client for many years, and her former partner has been a client for many, many more years. And they ended up building quite a lot of wealth through buying, renovating, and renting out real estate in Vancouver. Vivian owned a house when they met some 15 years ago. And then they bought a second house. They renovated the first one. They had a number of tenants in the first one. The second one had a number of tenants. Then they bought a third one. And recently, their relationship dissolved and they went their separate ways. And it resulted in a pretty complicated situation. And one of the key complexities in this situation is a very common experience for us as financial advisors. So what happened in that family is one of the two of them, him, was the main manager of the financial side of their operation, of their household. She was more hands-on the renovations, and she's an engineer, so she was the primary high-income earner. He was managing their investments, their RSPs, the financing management on the properties. He was managing tenants in and out and doing all of the sort of hands-on finance and personal stuff. The splitting up of the rental properties turned out to be very complicated, and the splitting up of their investments in RSPs turned out to be very complicated. And the complication was that he knew everything and she didn't. And it became apparent to our team that there was some lack of knowledge on both sides, and that as a result of that lack of knowledge, not necessarily intentionally, but Vivian was getting the short end of the stick. And so this happened, we became aware of this exactly one day after a Turnstone internal meeting where Robin said, okay, guys, I am maxed out. My calendar is booked. I cannot do any more financial plans. Please hold off on all referrals to me. I called Robin that next day and I was like, Robin, I need an emergency financial plan done. A couple of days later, Robin and Vivian met and went through the entire planning process. And we were able to refer Vivian to a family lawyer in our network and get her the support and professional advice that she needed to have an orderly and fair and legal distribution of assets. And so, as it turns out, everything is going to be perfectly fine. They'll have a little bit of a legal expense to cover in between now and them getting everything done up. So, part of the entire planning process here, we did not step in to this scenario because we thought there was going to be a lot of investment opportunity to be had, but we stepped into this scenario because we wanted to make sure that Vivian had all the information that she needed to have to make really informed, intentional decisions that were going to protect her future. And so the planning process walked through her long-term cash needs so that we could assure her that she is on track for retirement. We also needed to make sure that her short-term cash needs were met, because at the time that we met with Vivian, the two of them were still living in the same property, although separated, and she needed to move out and purchase a new property for herself. And so this is at this moment the end of the story, because it's mid-process, it's live, this file is open on our desks, and we're on standby waiting to hear back from them and their legal team on how assets are going to split up. So, we include this story because we really wanted to stress, again, how important investing is, but investing without a proper structured plan can be challenging. It can be detrimental to an individual's personal financial situation. Lynn and Robin swore me to 5 minutes per, and so that's 5 minutes. I am done with Vivian. If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat.
Thanks, Lynn. That was great.
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna jump in again, just because I think I put it in the reminder there in the comments there, right? It's one of those things where we just hear over and over and over again, oh yeah, my husband's got my financial stuff all sorted out, or my wife does it all, and it's just such a good reminder that whether we like it or not, like whether we've got that accounting brain or math brain or critical thinking brain, whatever it is, we have to take responsibility for it. And that that's my big push to women in particular, is we really need to take financial responsibility, and we need to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, and that if we have questions that we have people that we can reach out to, because I think that's part of it, is just that fear of I don't know what I don't know. So that's oftentimes the situation, is maybe Vivian didn't even know that she wasn't privy to all of the information. So it's kind of a you don't know what you don't know scenario. So good. That's a good one. Yeah.
That was part of it, but the other part of it is she's also emotionally exhausted and spent, and she was like, I'd rather lose $250,000 than address it, but didn't understand it was more than that.
Right. Yeah. And you can only get to the bottom of that with a team, right? You can't get to the bottom of that on your own. You have to have other eyes on it so you can work through the details of it.
And yeah, in our last meeting, she was just like, I don't know how this all works. And we're like, that's okay. That's what you got us for. And I think
Exactly.
people are afraid to ask the questions because they get to, like, they're established in their careers and they've built assets. And I think they're afraid to ask the questions or to admit that I don't know the answer to this. And that's okay. Like, we're here to help walk you through it. And that's actually a part of this case as well, which was really interesting, which is family. And this has been interesting. These intergenerational conversations are really important, especially now as our parents are aging. A lot of our parents, and I know my parents for sure, they're very close-mouthed about their own finances and don't want to share where things are at because you just didn't talk about that. You didn't talk about how much money you made or what you've got. But these conversations are so important because eventually when the rubber hits the road and you need to start dividing the assets, it can be quite complicated. And in my 30-year career working at the bank, I certainly saw a lot of really sometimes heart-wrenching situations. There was one client who just came in and she was just like, she literally had to go to every bank in town because she had no idea where her dad had kept all of his money. And by just having that open conversation, my goodness, it helps to alleviate some stress. And a lot of times it was in our family, my mom or my mother-in-law outlived my father-in-law and had to unravel everything that he had been doing with his finances as well, and really didn't have any idea because they had actually kept everything separate. So to be able to sit down with this family and do this intergenerational planning has been super interesting. So mom and dad are in their 80s. They're both retired, had a great nest egg built up, and both have really good pension plans. They bought a house with their youngest son and his family, wife and 2 kids. Yes, I think you saw that. Liza's commented on the pyramid. Will and power of attorney. My goodness, I can't stress enough how important that is. I'll circle back. Put a pin in that. Don't forget to, because I've got a comment on that one. So this family, mom and dad have bought a house with their youngest son. He works in the film industry. And so when things in the film industry were going well, when they first bought the house, which is back in 2018, no issues at all. But then in 2020, there was not a lot happening in the film industry. And then ever since that time, they have really struggled to get back on track. And mom and dad, obviously want to be able to help where they can, but now they're coming to me saying, we're starting to worry. We have a finite amount of money. We want to make sure that it's going to last for us, especially now since dad is running into some health concerns and he might have to go into care. It's really starting to weigh on our minds. And so luckily the family itself has got a really open dynamic. And the oldest son had come to us as well and says, I'm a little concerned. I want to make sure that mom and dad have got enough money and they're not worrying, because they'd confided in him. And so I've been doing now intergenerational planning with each of the 3 families, which can be a bit tricky because privacy is also very important. So I'm not sharing between the families. But what I've been able to do with the youngest couple is to help them with some budgeting and planning, because they've never had to work on a budget before. They don't know cash flow and where the money's going. And this is probably a common, it's the end of the month, I don't know where all the money went. And they're not the only ones that are guilty of that. I find it doesn't matter how much money you make, you tend to spend what you make. So interestingly enough, his oldest brother, who he and his wife are both well established, they have investments, they don't have any kids. And they actually said the same thing to me. Well, I don't know, we don't know where our money's going. I'm like, you guys also need to do a budget and just find out where is your money going every month and how much can we afford to direct to some investments, because you can't, your future depends on what you're doing today. So it's been such a fascinating to see the overlaps of all of them. mom and dad have got the budget like locked down. They know where all their money's going. They got that budget to me like the next day. It was amazing. The youngest couple struggling a little bit. You know, they've got kids. We don't really know where the money's going, and so that's been a work in progress. And then it's just been really great to see how that's going to be able to progress, because what they all want at the end of the day is to make sure that youngest son and his family can really be established enough on their own feet so that everybody can sleep better at night. And so this has been such a great project to work on all of them with. And like to Ilan's point, will there be a lot of, you know, from our perspective, maybe a lot of investment help that we can give them? Not necessarily, but where we're going to be able to help them to set themselves up for success in the future is tremendous. Did you want to touch on at all around what we're helping the oldest son and his partner do on the investment side, or do we want to just?
I think we're good. We're good on this one.
Yeah. So for them, it's been really interesting as well to have a different focus around how do we structure your portfolio? What does that look like? How are we got that diversified, and what different investments will help you to be successful? And a big piece for them as well is like, we really would like a cash wedge just in case we need to funnel some money over to mom and dad. And I see Liza has put a note in there around a budget template. Can't stress it enough. It's a great exercise for 30 days. Just track where you're spending all your money. It's illuminating.
Yeah, I did. I put the, talking about the budget, I just popped the budget template in there, and it's the one that we created for Ren, gosh, I think it's 6 years ago now. And the way we did it was to create your real budget and print that out, and then go and create your dream budget. So it's like, if you want to spend 2 months a year in Mexico, how much does that cost? Because then you can start to budget for what do you need to earn to be able to do that. So it's a really great exercise to do your, and being really honest, right? Like,
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time and they say, oh yeah, I did my budget. And I'm like, do you want to talk about it? What did you put in it? And they put like 10 things in there. I'm like, that's not a real budget. What about the magazines? What about the gifts? What about the coffees? What about the Uber rides, right? Like you've got to be really honest and put everything in there and really get an understanding of what you spend. And then you've got to be really honest with your dream budget too, because it's your budget. You don't have to share it with anybody, but it's the numbers that are real for you. So don't you want to know what that is? You're only fooling yourselves if it's not real. So just do it, and do it properly. Spend the time to do it. And we're actually probably going to do it as one of our exercises at the, we're going to do an event. We've almost decided we're doing an event on International Women's Day. And it will be one of the things that we actually do, which is bring in your statements, bring in your credit card stuff, bring in a month's worth of receipts, and sit down and work at a table with other people who are actually doing the budgets. Because a lot of people just, oh, it's so cumbersome. But when you do it and you actually see it, it feels like quite an accomplishment to get it done. And then when you do the next level, which is what's your dream budget, that's like, oh my God. And it's surprising for a lot of people because they realize they don't need as much as they thought they would to live the life that allows them to live in Mexico, or take an extra vacation, or take their mom and dad out for dinner, once or twice a month. So yeah, it's really a great exercise. So I just popped that in there. Download it, make a copy. Don't start doing the budget in that template. Everybody's going to see it. So make a copy of it and put it onto your own Google Drive. That's me
so
interrupting
powerful.
again.
Yeah, it's all good. And I should have prefaced it before we started. If you have questions, my goodness, don't hesitate to stick up your hand. We welcome that. But to your point, writing things down is super powerful, whether that's, your budget, it's the exercise of going through and really, figuring that out, or if it's your goals and what you want to achieve. I was at an event just like you're talking about, Liza, and one of the things that we did during this exercise was to write, like, what are 5 things that you want to achieve in the next 10 years, and make it outrageous. And so I wrote down these 5 outrageous things, put it in a portfolio. And when we moved, houses a few years later. I think it had been a 10-year, what you want to accomplish in 10 years. We moved about 6-7 years later, and I found this piece of paper, and my husband and I had accomplished every single thing that I had written down on that piece of paper. Unintentionally. I had totally forgotten that I'd put in that piece of paper in there. But just putting a pen to paper is a really powerful exercise.
Yeah, amazing, right?
Yeah, it totally
amazing.
Oh, and a will and a power of attorney. So I'll just touch on that really quickly because it was one of the things that we mentioned at the outset of this case. It is different across the country, and I know it's a little bit different in Ontario, but here in BC we have the Wills and Variance Act. And so if you don't have a will, your money is probably not going to get dispersed the way that you think that it is. And this was a really interesting conversation that I had with my sister. So my kids are grown up. My brother's got kids who are teenagers, and my sister and her husband don't have any children. And so I said to them, like, what's your plan? Like, you've built these assets up. Where do you want it to go? He said, well, I want it to go to our nieces. And I'm like, okay, well, like, have you done a will? And she's like, well, no, I just trust you guys to disperse it that way. And I'm like, well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not how it works. If you die and test it, your estate actually goes to your parents. There's a whole list. It's a prescribed list of who the money goes to first. I said, your money would be split actually between your husband's parents and our parents. And she was like, well, I don't want that. They don't need the money. I'm like, well, pitter patter, go down and get your will taken care of. The other thing that's really important is to have a power of attorney. And I also say like it's actually more important than having a will. And the reason for that is that, obviously losing a partner would be tragic, but what would be crippling financially is if you don't have a power of attorney, because there's no one to make your financial decisions for you. I can think of so many cases, but one was this gentleman who didn't have a power of attorney. He had a small business. He was running a restaurant, and he had a stroke, and the whole family worked in the restaurant, all of his kids. And dad had a stroke, and the son came in and said, like, we need to pay payroll and get everything dispersed. And we're like, there's nothing that we can do. So all of the funds were frozen. So it was heartbreaking because we knew that they were involved in the business, but there's nothing that we could have done to release the funds. So you want to make sure that you have a care director, that you have someone that's making choices for you, and that you have a power of attorney so that if you need to, your spouse can, or your partner can redeem funds to, pay for your care or sell your property if you need to. All these things that you can't do if you don't have those things in place. So really, really important.
And again, just to add to that, with me being down in Mexico for 2 months, right? Like I'm down here in Mexico, and while I'm away, I have someone who has a power of attorney because I've got real estate transactions that are going on. I've got bank drafts that need to potentially be done. So I wouldn't even consider going on an extended stay anymore without someone having a limited power of attorney while I'm away. So it's we've all got those stories of, oh shit, so and so was in Mexico and couldn't close on their house because the closing date got moved up and they had to fly back because they didn't have a power of attorney who could just get that done for them. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's little things like my youngest son, he works in Europe. So, but all of his stuff is here in my house, as it turns out. So, but he's like, oh, my car insurance, can you go and renew that for me? Yep. Or I need you to move, can you move some money from this bank to that bank? Or I need you to send some money to my account and wherever. Yeah, no problem, because we've got that in place. So just definitely, if you're thinking of traveling, it's a really good idea to make sure that you get that done before you go. All right, so this is another one, just run. Over to you, Ilan.
Thanks. I'm really excited to introduce y'all to Robert. This is going to be a bit of an uplifting story. And Robert is in here because he represents a pretty good percentage of our clients who are pretty young. So Robert's 38 years old, or will be soon in the next couple of months. Robert's regular old guy. He became, he got a ticket and has been working in the oil fields up north. He doesn't earn an enormous amount. He's earning about $130,000 a year. But here's the thing about Robert. Robert started investing in real estate pretty early in life. His dad encouraged him. And he bought a house up north, and he kept one little room for himself and rented the rest of it out to other laborers. And then he invested in Centurion Apartment REIT many years ago, and has more than doubled that money. And Robert is planning on retiring this year. He also owns a home in the interior with other family members, which is rented out, which he manages. And he also owns his own home in the interior, which is where he lives when he's not up at camp. And that home is also largely rented out. All three properties are revenue, are cash flowing positively and comfortably because they were bought many years ago. So, Robert comes to us and he's, toying with the idea of retirement. We actually got referred to him because he wanted to do an additional placement in Centurion. And on the surface, we took a look and we're like, yikes, buddy, you're way over concentrated here. About 30% of his investable wealth was in Centurion. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to do a financial plan, because the first question that we wanted him to have an answer to is, can you retire at 38 in 2025 and actually not ever work again? And turns out he can. Part of the reason for that is he lives pretty frugally, but he can easily retire. And that, when that was presented to him, you could just see his whole face and shoulders and body change in the Zoom meeting. He just, this relaxed came over him. And but there's a lot to do in Robert's case still. So one of the things that we did was we introduced him to a number of investments that were specifically not real estate, because he already has got huge exposure to real estate in his portfolio. So one of those investments was New Look Dental. New Look Dental is a great investment for an RSP, at least their debenture. This is an investment that we started working with, and I personally invested in kind of in their first innings about 6 years ago. And at that point, they had acquired 8 dental clinics in Canada, and they were managing those dental clinics and kind of starting to gain economies of scale and get them on the same booking software and the same accounting software, so that New Look could sort of manage the clinic's efficiency, kind of from one portal. And today, 6 years later, they just closed on their 38th dental clinic. They pay 9% on the debenture. All the equity sits behind the debenture. That 8% comes as interest. But if it's in an RSP or a TFSA, it's tax deferred or tax free in the case of the TFSA. And furthermore, if you don't need the cash flow, you can directly reinvest your quarterly distributions, and they give you a 5% discount on the reinvestment units. And so over the course of a 5-year term, you're earning just under 11.5% per year on a tax deferred or a tax-free basis with this recommendation. And so what we've started doing with Robert is we've started feathering in, if you will, a few additional private placements that are still able to get him, strong returns, but are complementing his real estate portfolio. And so I wanted to kind of weave that in as an example. Robert happened to be one of those cases where when Robin modeled the financial planning, it was pretty clear that if he was able to start drawing on his RSPs a little bit earlier, he would end up in a position where I think it took him into his 80s before there was a very nominal clawback on his OAS. And so we were able to help him understand whether he should be putting money into TFSAs or RSPs, and when he should start drawing money out of the RSPs and then pushing that money right back into the TFSA because he doesn't need it in that current year. And so we were able to develop a plan that is literally going to save Robert tens of thousands of dollars in taxes over the next few years, while adding diversification to his story. So, Robert was an example that we wanted to pull in because this is all about real estate. This whole conversation is about real estate, but we also need to diversify. And so that's Robert. Now, the last point that I want to just make about Robert, so I keep this under 5 minutes, is if you know you're going to have a degree of wealth in your future, and if you know that you want that wealth to go somewhere specific, then you need to talk with somebody who really understands intergenerational wealth transfer and has a good understanding of the tax management thereof. Because when your RSPs are maxed out and your TFSAs are maxed out, there are other vehicles like whole life insurance that one can use to further tax shelter the growth of money and very efficiently transfer it to the next generation without triggering taxes, unless, of course, you happen to be a dual citizen, in which case there are other steps that we weave into the process so that we can make sure that your intended beneficiary gets that money without it being clawed back on the tax side. And I'm under 5 minutes. Thanks.
You're doing a brilliant job. And from a planning perspective, to hear like the returns that these investments have is just makes my life super easy. Because from a planning perspective, I always take a super conservative approach, which is like I'm aiming for like between 5 and 6%. And so for someone like Robert, we modeled it at 5.85%, and here we've got these investments that are way overperforming that. So it only just makes the plan that much more successful to give that buffer of the what if, because he's got such a long time into retirement.
Okay, I'm going to go over 5 minutes. I need 10 more seconds.
You go right ahead, Ilan. That's a really good case study. I like this one.
So the thing that's different about Robert is we're all living longer. And so when we do a plan, we're assuming you're going to live to 100, unless there's like an overbearing health condition and there's no chance. But we want to be as conservative as possible, and we want to make sure that the plan outlives you. So when you're dealing with someone like Robert, we're planning for 60 years. That's 6 generations. That is, I don't know about you guys, but if I look back just 20 years, if you had asked me 20 years, if I thought that there was going to be a global pandemic, Trump was going to get elected, pick a whole bunch of things, I would have said, yeah, no, that's pretty unlikely. But look at the world today compared to 20 years ago. And so trying to plan 60 years of retirement for somebody is a specific, different, and specialized process. And talking with our clients and coaching them through the idea of what work is, what income generation is, and how they're going to actually live out 60 years and stay engaged is critical. And for me personally, I started giving professional financial advice in 1993. So that was a while back. And I started following Mr. Money Mustache. You can look him up, but he's a guy who retired at the age of 30 and then started a blog and became a multimillionaire from the blog. But early retirement is not like somebody who works to 65, retires, and we're planning for 35 years, and that's it. It's a totally different planning set of rules that we have to play with, and we've done a lot of it, and it's so much fun.
Mm-hmm. And the other one is a similar case with a young couple that I just met with earlier this week, as well as good income earners, and they haven't started any of this yet, but they want to. And they're like, we want to retire at 55. I'm like, great. Let me take that away, and then I could model it backwards. You can absolutely do that. This is what you need to do between now and then. And they were like, awesome. And that is so rare. And don't think that because they're just in their early 30s that you've missed a window of opportunity. You absolutely haven't. But I just thought it was so great to have this young couple who are just like, what do we need to do to get there? So, all right.
Liza, this is our last case is Gary. Do we, it is 8 o'clock. What do you want to do for timing?
Yeah, no, it's fine. We usually do 90 minutes. So we're scheduled for 90, and we sometimes, do an hour, and sometimes we finish right at the 90-minute mark. So everybody I think is enjoying the case studies. I think they show a really good perspective, and I say, let's keep going. And then I know we've got some questions for afterwards. So
awesome. Okay.
Let's learn about Gary.
I will speak to Gary. So Gary, we started this file probably September-ish. Gary was referred by a existing exempt, like private investment client. Gary, just a whole bunch of things happening in his life. So he was a retired small business owner, and COVID essentially shut his business down. He exited post-COVID. And, he said sometimes years were good and sometimes years were bad. And the people that got paid were the employees. And coming out of it, he didn't have a lot of savings. And in the same time frame, he separated from his wife, then bought a property with his new partner, and kind of knew it was coming. And then what eventually happened was he received a large inheritance from a sibling that passed, and large, 2.5, 3 million large. So he goes from, wow, I'm going to have to work forever. How do I support myself through retirement? And now he has significant funds. And it's really about, now that I'm retired, I want to live off my income, live off the investments from an income, but I don't want to deplete the capital. And I want to structure some trusts and different things, but ultimately the bulk of this investment, of this inheritance, will then pass to his kids. So and I tell you, it was very rarely do you come into a situation where it's like a clean slate. This money was sitting in the bank. He's like, okay, Lynn, what do we do? So it was, and there's nothing you have to account for this issue or this problem or this one's going to exit then. It was just free and clear. What do we do with it? So we did a financial plan with Gary, and some of this he had in process, but certainly it was I think good for him, making sure he was redesignating his insurance beneficiaries, talking to him about the trust. Fascinating thing so he'd been asking me about a trustee and what do we do for a trustee, and I've been trying to get him some recommendations. And Robin and I had a conversation yesterday, and it's like, what are we going to do with this trustee? Because I'm not getting any really solid recommendations. And she's like, well, why isn't he doing his kids? It's like, I don't know. And I asked him, what's up? I called him this morning, and he says, well, I didn't think the kids could be the trustee because they're the beneficiaries. It's like, oh, this made so much easier now. And all we had to do was ask the question. So it's great, because I was feeling bad that I couldn't help him with something, and then we did. So that was good. Anyway, so going through the planning process, we some of the investment was in an investment account already at a bank. One of our portfolio managers went through and did an assessment of how it was invested, and it was, very exposed to the North American market and a few different things, and they made some recommendations on how to diversify the public market stuff. He was very excited about the exempt market piece, and in this case, initially his focus was very much around everything he invested in needed to be income produced. So things like that New Look Dental, we have a number of different funds that have a high percentage or high distribution, high targeted distribution. As we worked through the planning process and showed, yes, between your public that is, even if we assume 5 or 6% and some of these other private market investments, you actually don't need everything to be producing income. You have more income than you need. So we can, number one, we want to invest things tax efficiently. So some of these investments pay return of capital instead of distributions that are deemed as income. So certainly let's pick and choose whether it's a non-registered account or a TFSA account. But then we can also do some investments that are more, long-term hold capital gain type investments versus strictly income producing. It took him a little bit to get his head around that he actually had more than he needed to live off the income. And then the next piece we're working with him on is insurance. Ilan mentioned whole life participating policies. Again, his retirement is fully funded. And at this stage, he's considering, the size of the estate that he's leaving to his kids ultimately. And how we can protect that estate is through insurance policies. I think I'm still on, but I have lost my camera. So if I don't know which camera I'm on.
We can
still
see
you and see you.
That's funny.
I think
Okay.
Froze for a half a second.
Yeah, I'll look into my camera, but I can't actually see you guys anymore. So I think I've captured the Gary case. I would say we're about 2/3 of the way done with his investments through both the exempt market and the public market. And then really it's the insurance piece that we are just wrapping up or really starting to engage on. And it's been fun. He's very engaged, which is, I think, a big part of it is, wanting to learn about the different investments and taking the time to review everything. And he's the first one that'll say, I don't know a lot. Robin, you mentioned people that didn't like to ask the questions. He's happy to say, and you've seen this, teach me. My job now is to manage this money, to provide income now and estate for the future. So yeah, I guess we can go to, Liza, I'd be fine if we want to open up to questions for any of those case studies at this point.
Yeah, I think if anybody has any questions, feel free to either just unmute and dive in or pop it in the chat. I think from my perspective, there's a couple of just sort of overarching points that are coming through really clear. So first, I think the team aspect that you guys have now. Lynn, we've been working with you for a number of years and it's been great. And Ilan, you and I have been getting together in the background, but adding Robin and adding the insurance piece and just the depth and listening to the three of you talk about it. You're all so passionate and you all want to help. Like that's just coming through so strongly. It just feels like whether you're just getting started, whether you're someone who's just starting out and you don't know anything about any of this stuff, you just know you need to get started, or you're someone, like Gary, who's just had a windfall and needs to know how to manage it and is also saying, I don't know what to do, help me. Like I think having people that are going to treat you with dignity, treat you with respect, not make you feel like you're stupid, not make you feel like, well, everybody else knows this stuff. That's coming through loud and clear. I think everybody would probably agree with me on that it just feels like you're holding our hands and in a very kind and respectful way. And I think that's where so many of the stories I hear are around, I just don't even know where to start, right? And it's that same answer. Just start. You don't even need to know. Again, you don't need to know what you don't know. You'll figure that out when you start the process, but just start the process because you get so much further ahead just by getting started. So I think that came through loud and clear. So yeah, thanks.
Liza, can I
really
just
like
pop
the case
in?
study model. Yeah,
Can I
please
just
do.
hop in with a quick request to everyone on the call? I would really appreciate it if you could take 10 seconds and just write some constructive feedback on the presentation. Tell us if you like the format, what information you might have wanted us to add or leave out. As Lynn said when we got started, this is our first time presenting in this way, and I just want to get a temperature of whether we should keep going down this path and developing kind of the meet our clients part of it. We've obviously changed their names for the presentation, but which made it a bit weird for us to actually talk about them. But I'd really love just a bit of feedback in the chat. Thank you.
Sounds good. So everybody, please put something in the chat about the presentation. If you want to just put it directly to, I think if you just click on the chat, you can send it to any one of the group. So you can send it directly to Ilan, or you can send it directly to Robin, or you can send it directly to Lynn. So pop that in there. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that we could probably just highlight is most of the investments are RSP eligible. So although we didn't
Robin, why don't you go to the next slide? Sorry, Liza, we did have an FAQ thing, and that and we can just put that up there.
Perfect. So before we jump into questions, let's go through some of the basic facts. That's perfect.
Sorry to cut you off. It was a
no, it's great.
Yeah, so one of those. I didn't do that, intro to the exempt market that we will often do. So kind of just capturing some of the highlights here is, as you mentioned, it's the minimum investment can be absolutely manageable. I mean, certainly when people come into the exempt market, we want to be able to diversify them. So typically it's, 4 or 5 or 6 different investments. So it does add up, but and that's what I've got down there for diversification. We like to see that. And exactly, usually available in registered and non-registered plans. And certainly we will strategically put different investments within either registered or cash plans based on some tax considerations. We have clients that are individual, and we also have corporate clients. So, and again, there's some tax considerations there. And I will say, this is not exempt stuff. Insurance policies. We were talking about whole life policies earlier, individual and corporate, certainly. So definitely that planning can capture the corporate idea. As I mentioned, back to the exempt, the one kind of defining aspect for exempt historically has been these are long-term commitments to investments. Typically, I'm going to say 5 years. We have a few that you could redeem without penalty within 3 years, but most are a 5-year hold. And then, as I mentioned, some are income generating, some are long-term capital gains, some are tax advantaged, many are a mix. And then, why would somebody sign up for this illiquid long-term hold? Well, because typically targeted returns are anywhere from 7 to 20% per year. So that is when you carve out a slice of the exempt markets, and even though we do the modeling, at maybe a 7 or 8%, when we can outperform that and deliver greater returns, that exactly adds buffer to that overall plan. I think that was, and then I guess we do both eligible and accredited investors is the one kind of FAQ that's not on this slide, but with the onset of the eligible definition, most people can now participate in the exempt market. And then we will just help them understand what, to what extent makes sense. So.
Perfect. I think that's great. And, one of the things that I had also thought about was, we talked a lot about the 5% returns. And a lot of times people say, 5% so low, 5% so low. But I think time and time again, the data has proven that if you are earning compound interest at 5% year over year, you are setting yourself up a nice nest egg for retirement. So I can see Robin's head nodding there. And so it's not like it has to be some super high rate of return. 5% can actually, over the long period of time, can be enough. So when you're getting more than that, It's excellent, but I just wanted to add that in there. And yeah, there's a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So Robert
Robert,
Scott is, yeah.
yeah, I see Robert's question there, and I'll say it's very similar, Robert. Whole life insurance is a piece of the puzzle on that infinite banking system, absolutely. I have begun research on that. I have other clients kind of using that term, and it's really kind of that not quite branding because multiple people do it, but it's understanding the pieces of it, and whole life insurance is definitely a piece of it.
Any other questions? And I'm sure you're going to post how to get hold of you so that when people are watching the replay.
Would have been a good idea.
I did at the very beginning. I'll do it again.
You put it in there?
Yeah.
And of course, Lynn, you're still on the website. So if anybody goes to the REN website, you just click on Lynn and you'll be able to connect with her, and we'll update it to Turnstone. We're actually just in the middle of moving the REN website over to Kajabi. Oh God, you guys hear me say this all the time. When you're moving a website, it's such a nightmare. It was supposed to be done mid-December, and I basically had to fire the person who was doing it and start from scratch. So, oh, the joys of the Kajabi expert. Joy, oh joy. Cool. Well, I think that was super helpful. I think it was just a really good reminder. I really love the case study format. I know that we have a person on the call tonight who lost a sibling, and she had to take some time off work, and she was really grateful that she had a good plan, she had a good financial plan, she had a good policy, she had a good nest egg, and she was able to, without turning her life and her finances upside down, she was able to do that. So and she's only in her 30s, so she started young, she did the right things young, and she was able to take advantage of it when she lost a sibling at a very young age. So it's so, accidents happen. We just don't know. That's why they call them accidents. So it's better to get this stuff organized in advance. So I'll be talking to the Turnstone team about the upcoming International Women's Day. Obviously, you can reach out to all of them. We'll probably see Ilan at a happy hour at some point. You'll see Lynn at a happy hour at some point in Ontario, because she'll inevitably pop into one. Robin, I'm sure we'll be able to get you to come down for a happy hour. So the first one for me being back will be February 12th. So I guess on that note, why don't I, just in case, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to jump in. But I just wanted to give everybody the quick rundown on the events that were coming up, because there's quite a few. Obviously tonight we're talking about exempt market strategies, private equity, and insurance. We'll have the video up on the REN Facebook page, and we're just also creating a new REN Club Google folder so that people can access that if they're not on Facebook. So again, that's all been a bit delayed because of this move, but we'll have that. We'll at least have the video up within the next couple days. February, for monthly momentum, we'll be doing a mortgage and market update. So might be another mortgage rate drop between now and then, but we'll do a little bit of a forecast for the spring. What's happening with the pending elections, and what impact do we think that's going to have, and just a good reminder about people who are starting to dip their toes in again to getting investing and buying your first property, or your first doing your first exempt market deal. So all of those things will kind of cover the basics. What else have we got coming up? We have, I'm just on my little notes here, we have happy hour coming up on February 12th. If you're in Puerto Vallarta, we're doing a boutique hotel tour on February 1st. And we have got, I think that's kind of the highlights of what's coming up for February. So the newsletter should be coming out tomorrow or Friday. It'll have all of the details in it. And it's, there's no doubt it's going to be another interesting year. I think we're starting to pull our heads out of the sand, which is a good thing. And I've started to see everybody that's been reaching out has said there already feels like there's some momentum again. So yeah, it's good. It's going to be fun, and it is it's 2025, so it's a milestone year because we're a quarter of a century in. So it's a good opportunity to reflect back at the last 25 years, and then we're all going to be living longer, so we need to plan for the next 25 years. Like, I'm pretty confident that every single one of us on this call could very well be around for at least 25 more years. So how are we going to set ourselves up for such a good future and make the next 25 years even better than the last 25 has been? And yes, I was going to tell you about the background picture. So just another one of those small world stories. A number of you may remember, probably 6 years ago when I first came down to Mexico, one of the first properties I looked at was a place called Casa Virgilio. And if you Google it on YouTube, you'll see a walkthrough, and I've got a little walkthrough video. And it's a 14 little sort of mini apartment house that's in Nuevo Vallarta, which is about, let's say, a 20-minute drive from here. Now, some of you may also know that I've become very good friends with the gentleman, the team who painted our Belmont house in Fernwood. They happen to be two young Mexican painters. They started a painting company called Wilson's Pro Painting. They've already franchised it. They're on their 4th franchise. They're killing it. They're planning on doing $3 million in revenue this year. And I met their parents, and now every time we come to Mexico, we all get together, my mom, their parents, and we have brunch together, and it's like they absolutely love my mom, and we have this lovely time. And so this time we went closer to their place, and we went to this restaurant, and I said, oh, I've been here before. I came to this restaurant when I went and looked at Casa Virgilio, which is this house that I looked at. And the parents said, oh, we live 5 minutes from Casa Virgilio, right around the corner. So they're literally, Casa Virgilio is like on one end of the street. There's a canal that goes through the property. Casa Virgilio is on the let's call it the south end of the canal. Their house is on the north end of the canal on the other side, and it's literally a 5-minute walk, and they walk past it every day. So I just said, oh my gosh, now that makes me want to go back and look at Casa Virgilio again, because I will have people to look after it who live what's around the corner. So it's suddenly made that very appealing again. And that's my little funny small world story about Casa Virgilio. Isn't that crazy? Like, my Mexican painter's parents live 5 minutes from a property that I looked at in 5-6 years ago. So there we go. Fun. All right, everybody, if there's no more questions, I think everybody knows how to reach Ilan and Lynn and Robin. And of course, somewhere in the mix, we'll see Jen at some point. We'll meet her in person in the future. But this was super enlightening. And I'm really glad that you chose us to do your first sort of experimental presentation on. I think we're a pretty easygoing group. So hopefully you got some good information. And once we post the video, we'll get some more feedback for you as well. And thanks everybody for joining in for the first monthly momentum of the year. I know we had a lot of people emailing today saying, oh my God, I'm away, I'm not going to make it. Margaret, one of our friends, she's at the pub drinking with my mom because she just arrived in yesterday, and they're playing bingo and having a drink. And my mom texted me and says, what are you doing this? I'm like, I have a meeting. So, and I've got like 10 friends coming down from Vancouver, Victoria, and Toronto in the next, I think they all start arriving in the next week. One of them's Angie. Angie's on her way down. So Angie's coming down very soon. And Deb's already here. And Alexis is off to Costa Rica. So yeah, lots of exciting things going on. And so let's call it a night on that. And thank you everybody for coming in, and great to see you online. I can't wait to see you all in person. And we'll send out that newsletter with lots of information. And I hope you all have a really good start to 2025.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.